Right, I make it 8 o'clock. So good evening, everybody. Welcome to this month's live conversation with the team behind Sidetracked, or some of the team. It's quite an extensive crew. We'll be meeting a few of them shortly. So I guess I need to start. Well, no, actually, before we get on and talk about Sidetracked, I need to start. They say never start with an apology, but tonight I've got to apologise to the leader of the 7th St Matthew's Scouts because I double booked myself. So right now, I'm meant to be on top of the local church tower, throwing paper aeroplanes off the top of there on behalf of our local scout troop, of which my eldest is a member, because the scout is afraid of heights. Unfortunately, I'm double booked, and of course, you guys get precedence. So when the scout leader from 7th St Matthew's never talks to me ever again, I'm just going to blame you. So it's as simple as that.
Well, apologise on our behalf.
Does this mean that the scout leader is now on top of the steeple despite being afraid of heights?
Yeah, I believe so. It was when he was describing how he got up there, and he went, well, you go up a spiral staircase, and then you go up a metal spiral staircase, and then you go up a narrow ladder, and then you go up another ladder. And at this point, his face had blanched, and he's like, "You're not any good with heights, are you, Tim?" I was like, "Well, you know, I can climb a bit." He's like, "Oh, brilliant! Would you go up there for me?" So I agreed, completely forgetting that we were doing this. So there we go. I've lent them a rope and patted them on the back, and I'm sure they will all be fine.
What could go wrong?
I'm sure.
What could go wrong? Right. Seriously. Welcome to the Sidetracked team. Welcome in particular, John. I have to say a big thank you to John for kind of teaming up and running the competition this month and last month. For me as a little upstart brand, it's like a massive vote of confidence. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, John. You've worked with lots of big brands in your time, and now you're working for me. Well, not for me, with me. So it's an absolute honor.
Like that. I think it's been really good fun working together, and that's the only way I say it. I'm blushing here. You can't see.
It's so hot, isn't it?
Clearly, but
you couldn't tell if anyone was blushing.
No, it's been really good fun this last couple of months working with you, and I've learned a lot from you too.
Oh gosh, wow. Well, that's far too kind of you to say, John. I don't believe a word of it. So since we're chatting, let's kick off, and you can introduce us to the Sidetracked story. So we're on, what's this? Volume 21 now.
21, yes, yeah.
Wow, that's been a while. So when did it start out?
It actually started in a sandwich shop in 2011. Yeah, we've been running 10 years, and it started with an idea and a meatball sub. And the idea was that I wanted to stop doing commercial work for corporate clients and try to focus on creating something that's good, that's magical, that shares some amazing stories from around the world, and just do something a little bit different. I was doing a lot of women's e-commerce design websites. Sorry, I'm a website designer. I should point that out. That was my job before Sidetracked. I was doing a lot of women's e-commerce design, quite high-end fashion, and then into the corporate world after that, and it wasn't the direction I wanted to be going. And it was a slight epiphany alongside the meatball sub, but also, I'm just going to grab it 1 second, excuse me.
Go for it.
Was thanks to, I don't know, some of you might remember this, thanks to the Ride Journal as well, which I still stand by is the finest independent print magazine. Oh, there we go. Well done, Tom. And I had the collection of all 10 issues up there, and Andrew DeProse, Phil DeProse, Dean Taylor, the original graphic designer, was one of the guys I was working with, and they came up with this incredible journal way before the massive resurgence of independent print. They were one of the very first, and I looked at it and it absolutely blew my socks off completely. So that, alongside the fact that I've always loved adventure storytelling, historic expeditions and exploration, and also combined with the fact that I didn't want to be doing corporate web work anymore, and the fact that I loved that meatball sandwich, it all came together and Sidetracked. So Sidetracked, actually, the name came from me being sidetracked, distracted from my day-to-day work. That's how it all started off.
All the best projects start out as side projects, or maybe we say that because for both of us that's how we did it. But it's quite a good way in, isn't it? If you can sort of dip your toe in, yeah, and learn a lot and see what works for you without necessarily having to go all in. I mean, that's why I started out as a side project. Was that the same for you?
Yeah. And I went back to my desk with my sandwich and registered, I think it was sidetrack.co.uk, and then opened Photoshop and started designing the Sidetrack website version 1. And that, through various iterations in the following 3 years, grew it just organically. I emailed a few people and begged and borrowed different stories, with permission, of course, to publish on the site, and organically our presence grew. I had no idea about social media or anything like that. That was completely new to me. I launched the site and I had 300 visits in the first month, and I was over the moon, absolutely over the moon. So yeah, so that grew for 3 years, and then I went to the Kendal Film Festival, and I was just showing people the website on a laptop I was carrying around randomly. I didn't even have an iPad, and they said, "Oh, this stuff's really nice. You should make a magazine." And that, combined with seeing the Ride Journal, I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it." And so it started from there. We went to print with issue 1 in 2014. And thankfully for us, The Guardian picked it up and ran it as one of the best new independent journals out there. So that did us some good. And we sold out of volume 1 pretty quickly. We had to reprint that. And then here we are, 21 issues later.
Wow. That's quite a good story. So was it just you when you went to the magazine format, or had you got a good team behind you at that point?
No, at that point, in terms of production, it was me and freelancers, and a partner that put in some seed investment to get us off to start, because I persuaded them that we couldn't run it on a shoestring. We had to turn it into a real functioning business. We had to start paying writers, photographers, editors, sub-editors, proofreaders, and pay for print. And I think we managed to get 3 adverts in the first issue. So obviously there's a lot of outgoings. So we got a small amount of investment to get us going as well, which eternally grateful for. Yeah.
Cool. And has that, because I know lots of magazines start out and they're at that point of, well, we can't really pay contributors and stuff like that. I always got the sense that you did a lot to support the creatives who were behind the scenes, and we'll talk to some of the team.
Massively. I always thought that whilst I wasn't getting paid, whilst no one was getting paid, then we shouldn't be taking any money. But the minute it turned into an official business, I suppose, when we started generating a little bit of income, selling a few adverts, selling a few magazines, it's absolutely vital that we start paying the contributors. And it was token payments to start with. I mean, we're talking 10 years ago, but it's grown, and we're doing our very best with each issue to improve rates that we're paying everyone. And it's a functioning business, and we have to make sure everyone gets paid, and paid to the best that we can. That's the way these people give up. They put in masses of time and effort in creating stories, going out and doing the trips, photographing them, and we work with them in creating these amazing stories. And wow, yeah, they deserve way more than we can pay them, but we do our very best, and we continue to do so. And we're doing better and better each time.
Oh, I think you definitely get a sense of that community from the journal. from the outside, it almost looks like you've been surfing this wave of a resurgence of outdoor culture and adventure culture. Is that how it feels to you? Have you noticed the difference around you?
I think it was good timing that we came on the scene, and there's been obviously, as you said, there's been so many new ones crop up. Not just the outdoors, but independent magazines. There's everything you could possibly want, from ginger cat magazines through to, I can't think of another one, but the ginger cat magazine was quite specialist. But the outdoor adventure scene is going nuts at the minute. It's brilliant. It's really exciting to see how everyone is embracing it and trying to do better with it as well. And I think that's really enjoyable, and we're kind of happen to be in the right place at the right time for that.
So I started out in 2015, and at that point I kind of got a sense of a movement, and it was journals like yours and books like the Outsiders that really sort of, for me, capitalized on the fact that there was this unmet demand to get back out there and kind of live in a different way. Because I remember when it wasn't cool to go hiking and mountaineering and climbing and all that sort of stuff, and over the time I was away from the outdoor scene, it completely changed, and I came back to it and I was like, wow, this is amazing, and it is lively and vibrant, and I think you guys are a really big part of that.
That's great. It's nice to hear. I feel like we're trying to be at the forefront and encourage people to get out and do something, whatever they might choose to do. Life is better away from your sofa. As hard as it is to get yourself off that sofa, so we're trying every different way possible to get you moving out there. So
I mean, you must get pitched so many adventure stories, and I've said a couple of times online and in our emails about, I think there's few people who've probably had so many pictures of, I'm doing this crazy thing and I'm doing that crazy thing. Would you take the story? How on earth do you weed your way through all of those different potential stories that you could tell?
It's a nightmare. It really is. It really is. It's because everyone's put their heart and soul into everything they've done, and to try and pick out from a vast number of different ideas of what people have done and how they've done it, and to them it's their ultimate adventure. To us, maybe it may not be so, or maybe it's something we've covered before in a different format. There's so many different processes we have to go through to try and whittle down the stories.
So do you have any
rules? For Sidetracked, it's definitely about photography as well, we find.
And I can see Martin's joined us now. Hello, Martin. Thank you for joining us. Should we bring Martin in and talk photography briefly? Because I guess you can probably recreate most of the words, but the photography is the bit that you can't go back and do again. I find this all the time when I'm shooting the book covers and I'm doing the remote readings, and I always come back and, oh, I wish I got this shot, I wish I got that, and you can't do it over. So does the photography become one of the most important decisions about what goes in?
Massively. Go on. Martin's on mute, so I'll answer while he sorts his unmute out. Martin, you're on mute. You're on mute. You're on mute. Yeah, photography first. No, not photography first. You need an amazing story to tell, and then you need to have amazing photography to support it. I'll let Martin pick up from that point.
So I think Sidetracked is photography led, but the story behind the adventure has to be important too. It can't just be an absolute jolly for no reason. There's always some measured response to whatever the journey's about. and then the photography is an extra layer of value on top of that for the reader, I think. So, for example, we wouldn't support a generic South Pole journey to the South Pole just because it's a first or a fastest. There has to be something else to it, or some amazing storytelling, not just beautiful photography. But we are, as visual, everyone seems to be guided by visuals nowadays, and photography is the best language for that because it's multilingual photography. So photography has to lead the story for sure. And if the story's epic and the photographs aren't, we can't really support that in Sidetracked because it needs to be a cocktail of both, because both have huge legacy value in terms of adventure. Can't just have pretty pictures and a lame story, and you can't just have an epic story with no pictures. And that has always been the case since the start of exploration. So yes, we do value images hugely. We also value the authenticity of a story that has got some original content too. So it has to be both.
So, you jumped immediately to the South Pole, and you've got, I think, Martin, you've got quite a pedigree of adventure yourself that means that you can trip off these sort of names and places. Just tell us a little bit about some of the things that you've done and the places that you've been in the course of your career.
Okay. So I did I first left Europe when I was 25 to go to the Himalayas on an expedition to join a trip to Mount Everest. The purpose was to put the first British woman on top of the summit of Mount Everest to celebrate the 40th anniversary, and that was in '93. That was my first time out of the UK as a 25-year-old. Sorry, out of the Europe as a 25-year-old. That was an amazing experience. And today, 25-year-old, not most, but some 25-year-olds have travelled the globe by the age they're 25, and that was my first time outside of Europe. So I was quite scared and didn't know what I was going in for, and got very sick on that expedition and found an incredible thirst I didn't think was actually would be able to be what's the word, self-perpetuating, as it were. I thought I could do one expedition and that would be it, because most people in life do one expedition and that's it. Might do two, might do three. I thought one would be enough. And then by pure chance, the guy who I met on that expedition, Paul Deegan, invited me in '94 to go to Aconcagua on another expedition. And I said no, because I couldn't afford it, which is a ridiculous excuse, and regretted that ever since. And then he invited me again in '99 to go to the Eastern Pamirs to climb on Unclimb mountain range. And after that, I realized that the way to get funding for an expedition is to ask people to give you money in exchange for photographs, because that's the first thing that corporates ask you for is photographs. And then I realized the value of photography on expeditions to communicate an idea or a place or a reason for doing something. And that was the sort of catalyst for starting my adventure photography career. And from that point onwards, every single part of the globe seemed to be accessible, get people to give you money in exchange for going somewhere with a purpose, to give their brand some kind of extra value they wouldn't have otherwise, and that's what started it.
And you know, I think it must have taken you so many places. Mentioning the South Pole and photography, I'm sure you're a big fan of the Endurance book with Frank Hurley's pictures.
Oh yes, from South.
Yeah, this is from Endurance, but yes, from that one. This is the one book that I always wanted to send subscribers, and I've never been able to. But I think it does exactly what you're talking about there. It's like one of the first bringing together of an expedition that's beautifully shot and illustrated, and without those photos, it wouldn't be the same experience by any stretch. So I think time and time again it's been proven. So obviously shooting in extreme locations, it's not an easy thing to do. Have you ever found that your gear's failed you and you've missed crucial shots that you were after?
Oh my God, yes. Every photographer on any expedition, Frank Hurley included, from the expedition of Shackleton's, they will miss thousands more shots than they can possibly ever wish to get. And that is a painful process that every photographer on any expedition, even today, has to accept, that they will miss things. It is a curse, but it's also a driving motivation for any photographer. You have to accept that you can only capture what you're able to do at the time, given the weather, given your fatigue, given any circumstances, dangerous, death or living, and Frank Hurley had those choices to make, and so did Ponting, and so did the photographer on Sir John Franklin's expedition when I've forgotten his name now, when he went there. You have to make a choice, and you have to be part. The thing about expedition photography, which separates itself from any other genre, is that when you join a team on an expedition, you have to have a conversation with the team saying, if there's a situation that needs to be photographed, I have to do that, and you have to accept that I'm going to do that. Even if you need help, I won't come to you unless you ask for it, because that is the whole role of a documentary photographer, and that is what expedition photography is: documentary photography. But in Sidetracked, we have an amazing cocktail of documentary photographs and art photography and everything in between that, which is what makes the greatest cocktail of adventure, because there's all those things are part of adventure. There's documentary, there's creative landscape photography, there's creative portrait photography. Most of all, there is storytelling photography, which is what we do at Sidetracked. Every single image in Sidetracked is a robust document that can stand on its own. That is why it's so successful, I think, because people who are, I'm going to be very judgmental now, and I love doing broad sweeping generalizations, but I think
we love broad sweeping statements.
People who venture away from the safety and the comfort zones of their own home have a kind of intelligence. That is, they're socially aware, they are life aware, and anyone can stay at home, can go to the office 9 to 5, and we have adventurers who have 9 to 5 jobs in Sidetracked. We've got adventurers who are independent, self-employed people, and everything in between. But they choose to take themselves out of their comfort zone, whatever that is, put themselves at risk, take themselves far away from home, because they want to live life. And that is the whole point of Sidetracked. And that is, I believe, what attracts readers, is that people who want to live our one life, they do it with adventure. And you can't live your one life through business, unless you're Jeff Bezos, for example, and that's not a good example, I don't think, but especially given that fact he's gone into outer space just recently, and so Richard Branson. But I think people who want to, I'm a firm believer in the meek shall inherit the earth, and I think all those people who believe that are readers and contributors to Sidetracked. That's what I would say about adventurous types.
Yeah, I know. I completely agree, and that's I think that's one of the things that we were talking before you joined, John. John and I, about how it'd been good working together and collaborating. And I think the sense of that is that we're both talking to those same sorts of communities who do want to go beyond and not live that everyday life, because we recognise that it is brief and it's precious, and you only get one shot at it, so you've got to make the most of it. And I think that's what we're all doing in our own way. But I think it's been really interesting that it's been sidetracked, because we used to feature journals, and then in lockdown we stopped featuring journals, basically because I wanted to immerse people a bit more in a world that they could properly get into a story and kind of disappear. But we took a vote at the start of the year and asked people whether they wanted to bring them back, and the overwhelming majority did. And I firmly believe it's because people want to see it in as well as read it and create those images in their heads. So obviously, Sidetracked was a brilliant one to start. I wanted to ask about the cover, which I think is absolutely brilliant, but strikes me as a very brave sort of cover to be putting on an adventure journal, because it's not screaming adventure, is it? What was the thought process behind that? So for anyone who's not read it, it comes from an article which is very adventure-y about trekking across Iceland and in quite perilous circumstances, which is beautifully shot. But it's a very interesting image. I wondered if you could share that thought process.
Is that a question to me or to John?
It's a question to you, I think. I don't know. How did it come about? Let's bring John in as well.
Okay.
How did you come up with this cover, guys?
Okay, I'll start. Well, the cover, Martin and I think it's the most fun time of the magazine, because our process is that we've commissioned and received all of the stories, and we're working on the layouts, and then Martin and I will work together. Martin will shortlist the photos from quite a massive selection that gets submitted for each article, and then I'll work on the layouts, and we'll back and forth to see how the placement looks, which photos are in the right place, whether we need to look at cropping anything, how the balance of the images works across the article. And there's quite a lot of time spent on each article, and a huge amount of back and forth. And it's the bit that I love the most about putting the magazine together, is the time that Martin and I, it's WhatsApp screenshots, it's messages, emails, it's everything. Oh, what about trying this one? Okay, yeah, try this, and back and forth. Quite relentlessly for about 2 weeks before we come to the final layouts that we're happy with. And then at that point, we think, we need a cover. And we do it every time. And then we literally dive back into the entire, I'm going to guesstimate 400 odd photos, shortlist that down to probably about 30, maybe even 40 covers. And we try them all. We try them flipped, rotated, upside down, how the typography works with the photo. And we look for something that's different each time, something that questions, something that's unique, something that stands out as not being seen anywhere else in that form before. Martin can carry on now.
So ultimately, with every single issue, we'll get it down to 2, ultimately, and then it's easy to get an edit down. It's easy to get an edit down from 100 to 30, and then a little bit more difficult to get it down from 30 to 20, and then harder to get it down from 20 to 15. And then once we get down to the covers, then it's a really tight battle between shan't we, with each cover. But ultimately, apart from one, I'm very happy with every single cover we've chosen.
Oh, we only that one, the unspoken one.
Yeah. But the cover needs to say in some way what Sidetracked is about. People who know Sidetracked will pick it up anyway. The idea of the cover is to engage people who don't know, who haven't experienced Sidetracked, to pick it up. That's the point of the cover. And quite often we'll have a similar conversation, which is that cover looks like it's a travel magazine or a travel brochure, or that cover looks like it's just for mountain biking, or that's a cover that looks like it's for people who do surfing and nothing else. So the cover has to be representative, or has to engage people who haven't really experienced Sidetracked before. That's the point of the cover, is to get people's attention. And sometimes it's easy because there are pictures that just attract everyone's attention. And sometimes in a whole issue, ultimately there's only one picture that will attract more people than others. And John and I have to work out between us which cover is going to attract more unknowns than the knowns of Sidetracked. That is an amazing conversation to have with John and with the audience of Sidetracked. And that's always always going to be some kind of social experiment of some sort or another. But that particular cover, once you know the story, you think you don't know quite what it is, so you might pick it up and you like think, what's that? I don't know what it is. Is it a fashion statement? Is it a art thing? What is it? That particular was interesting. It was a very brave cover, for respect for John to saying yes to that, but it is an intriguing concept. What is it? Because you don't know what it is until you pick it up and you look at the story. That's the point of picking up a magazine. So in that respect, hopefully that kind of intrigue will attract people who are already curious about life and about things they're not experienced. So that's the point of that cover. And I think that cover does it very well, because it's not someone, excuse me, John, standing with their back to the camera looking at a lake or an ocean. It's not an Instagram obvious choice that I despise, but it is enough. There's enough there for someone who's already interested to pick it up, and that's the point of the covers.
Yeah, and the other one that I don't know if I've got it here, I've probably got it somewhere, is Jay Kolsch's, where there's a chop saw pulling through frozen salmon. I think that image, and then you get into the story, but the image on its own, when you don't know what Sidetracked is, it's going to be one that it's just intriguing. It's different. As Martin said, you're not stood by a lake. It's something very, very enticing, I suppose, and a beautiful, beautiful photo. So we do seek out the unexpected, I think, is the answer.
And I should say, I can see we've got there's some questions that are coming on the chat, so I will pick those up in a minute. If folk want to ask questions, please feel free to do it in the chat. I will try and slot them in. I'm just fascinated chatting to the guys, so I haven't even had a chance to have a proper look at them, but I will do. But I wanted to just to carry on that for a moment. And has it become easier to be braver, or to be brave, as you've been more established, or has that bravery always been there?
I would say, I think the bravery has already been there. It's just we're being seen for doing so a little bit more now. We've been around a little while, which is an amazing position to be in. But I think our primary objective to do something a little bit different, to make people question a lot. Sorry. Hang on. Martin, you carry on. I'm going to go mute a second.
Okay, so let's just, a good example, I think, is the last cover we did, not the recent one, but the cover. There was a collaboration between Gucci and North Face. We knew that was going to attract controversy of some description, and we knew we could have chosen a classic Sidetracked epic cover of someone rock climbing and looking amazing. Instead, we chose something that was completely an adventure anomaly. Some bloke dressed in effectively a smoking jacket, looking like I don't know what, and an actor from a film. It wasn't an adventure photograph, and we knew people were going to go, what the actual fuck is that? And we knew some people go, actually, I support that because of what the brands are doing. That's why the cover was there, to get people to think, oh, what's this all about? And then if you dive into the story, you'll realize that Gucci and North Face, regardless of what you think, they are, not what you think, regardless of how much they're doing, they are opening up a conversation about conservation and ethical travel and ethical producing and sustainability. That is the point of that cover. And I lost a lot of followers personally from my Instagram account straight away. I lost about 70. They're gone, which I don't think other magazines of the genre are able to do, because I don't know the full dynamics of how the magazine operates. I'm interested in pictures, not business particularly, but Sidetracked has an incredible position that it's able to be more independent than other magazines, I think, in that to stir up the pot of adventure and create conversations. That's a great thing about Sidetracked, and that credit really goes to John, really, I would say.
And that Gucci feature and it certainly did seem to stir up a debate. That's the one you were both laughing at, about the one that you don't mention. That's right, isn't it?
No, it's another one. I'm very happy with that choice of cover. There's another one which.
Oh, we'll talk more about Gucci in a minute. Come on, which is the one that you're not happy with? We need to know.
Well, it's the only cover I think looks like some kind of exotic travel brochure. And
I know what you mean. Yeah. It is one of the most successful. So,
come on, which cover is it? You have to describe it for us if you haven't got one to hand.
It's a photograph of a yellow airplane and some bloke walking towards it, and it's on a lake somewhere. I don't know what it is. It's a beautiful picture, actually. It is a lovely picture, and I wish I'd taken it. But it is not. I don't believe it's Sidetracked, and it's, even though it is, and it was in there. But we did it. We did it because the photographer who shot it was an incredible outdoor photographer, and I love his work. And we were hoping to broaden our reach to a bigger audience because of his following. So that was the reason for that. But in the overall global view of Sidetracked, I don't think it's the best cover we've ever had.
Yeah, but I will also say that it was one of the most popular on the newsstands. Interesting.
There you go. You see?
But
it did its job.
It did its job.
Very well.
But as we've always said, we don't want to be the norm. We want to question. We want to intrigue. We want to do things a little bit different. And we are genuinely making things up as we go along. So we're finding our feet. We're still finding our feet. We're a young team. We're only just actually starting talking to each other, really, other than via me through various different conversations. So we're gradually opening up and learning to be a business, and there's a lot to that. And communication, internal communication, is a huge part of that. But we are testing the waters with every single thing we did. And that included the Gucci North Face project that we did.
Let's bring in Tom and Jenny, because you've sort of segued very neatly into where I was going to go. You'd think I wasn't making this up as I went along. I brought Ant in. Sorry, Ant. I missed Jenny completely. Hang on. Bye, Ant. Hello, Jenny.
Hi.
It was the beard that gave it away.
Yeah, I need to get a beard. Then I'd get into the adventure world a bit better.
No, you don't.
Thanks, Martin.
But I wanted to ask you all this because we mentioned at the start that there has been this massive resurgence in outdoor culture and adventurers. I think it's got to be the most overused term out there. You know, everything is branded as an adventure, from ice cream to peanuts to cars. You can't watch an ad break without there being an ad about adventure, and I find it cheapens it in many regards and almost devalues the word. But how does it feel to be in this industry that everyone comes at it from so many different perspectives, and so often that perspective seems to misunderstand what adventure genuinely is? And that's a question to you all. Anyone's welcome to answer, apart from Tom, who's on mute.
You know, I have a really loose definition of adventure, and I think, you know, anything can be an adventure. It's just a mindset. You know, starting a business, starting a family, a relationship, any of that is an adventure as much as climbing a mountain is. And that's one of the reasons why I believe that adventure, in the way that we communicate it through Sidetracked, is so important, because it's a great place to learn these big lessons that apply to the rest of your life. And if you treat your life as an adventure and as a challenge, then, you know, as John says, gets you off the sofa, proverbially. So yeah, I do totally appreciate what you mean, that adventure is just like the cool word in marketing right now. Everything is adventure, all up in our grills. But, you know, I think if that's the trend right now in the world, that's way better than anything else it could be. So I'm cool with it.
Go on, what's everyone else think?
What Jenny said, Tim. I don't know. I'm also very aware that in the grand scheme of things, compared to some of the people who are on the call, I've not had adventures to that degree, but it's always been about the way it's made me feel. And that sense of adventure, the sense of excitement that you get when you're packing your bags to head off, the stories that you get to tell after the event is as important as anything else. And yeah, I do equally feel that it's a term that gets overused, but I think it's overused because people want to have that sense of adventure in their lives. So it's an easy thing to try and sell.
Fair enough. Is there a sidetracked definition of adventure? Do you have a go-to definition? You go, well, this doesn't really fit with what we think as adventure.
No. You can't pin that down. No, we have a mission statement. I'll paste it into the chat, which is rather where we see ourselves going. But no, you can't define adventure. I don't think I would specifically label it from our perspective. No.
Yeah, like it's funny. I mean, I always hate saying it because it sounds really weird, but kind of a professional adventurer. So it is something that I have to come up against all the time with my colleagues, is whose adventures are like, what's the ranking order or whatever. So we do have a culture of first and fastest. If things are the first or the fastest, those are the only adventures that are valid. And I do think that's really broken, and that's something that we don't chase down with Sidetracked, because it's like Martin was saying, it's all about story. The story has to be good. The reason that you did the adventure has to be good. Especially if you travel around the world, you have to have a good reason for having that impact. So yeah, we focus on story and not on who's the hardest kind of thing.
Yes. Well,
and I think that sort of plays into one of the questions that Feasts and Fables asked right at the start, which was how do you strike a balance between adventures that we could all reasonably take on and the ones that our jaws drop at and we'll only ever live vicariously?
How do we strike a balance in terms of how we portray them, or how people perceive them, I wonder. For me, we try to cover all ends of the scale, most ends of the scale. Certainly the extreme ends is where we're mainly at. But we do publish stories, probably more online than in print, other than a few maybe single moments. But some of the online content is a little bit more attainable, or some of the interviews we feature are a little bit more about accessible adventure, and doing better in the community as well. It's hard because our origins are at the extreme end of things. That's when I first started it. That's where I wanted it to be. It was right up there, right on the edge. Stories from the edge, which actually has become a new series we're running. But right at people at the very limits. And gradually, the whole magazine has evolved, and it's definitely human emotion, personal storytelling, with a lot of cultural influences and learning and discovery, as much as it is endurance and extremes. And as everyone said, it's not furthest, fastest, highest, but people do push themselves pretty hard. And that's where we started. But I think as we're learning and growing, we are realizing that there's a space for that, but there's a space for so much more. And that's where we're sort of moving into a lot more.
That's from John. I think yeah, Sidetracked is the beauty of Sidetracked is it's one end of the spectrum. It's kind of the Red Bull genre of high adrenaline. You're either dead or you're either okay or you're dead. Nothing in between. That kind of adventure. And at the other end, we've got the really poetic stuff that is really accessible, that we can all relate to and all aspire to. Which, for example, forgot the name of the guy who went out every morning to be in the sea.
My guest.
My guest, yeah, guest.
Yeah, that, my God, that made me cry reading that, and looking at the pictures made it all the more three-dimensional for me. That is adventure in its absolute purest economical sense. You could walk out the front door, go into the sea every morning and do something. I wouldn't dare, I wouldn't dare do that. I wouldn't want to be in the sea at dark, even up to my neck. No, thank you. So, and the reasons he did it were all reasons we can relate to. My God, that is pure adventure. It doesn't need to be a first summit or a fastest or a longest or a shortest or a highest, whatever. And that's adventure. And Jenny Tufts, we have to bring her into this because she is an incredible, we have to bring women into this right now, I think, in this conversation, because women and men adventurers, they seem to be, the adventure world seemed to be dominated by men, roughy tufty blokes with beards. And then you got Jenny Tuft, who will go cycling and running into the darkest, deepest underworld of Colombian smugglers on her own. I wouldn't dare do that either. Camping with an earshot of a town where there's none, infidels and drug smugglers, and she's on her own doing it. And that is one thing I'm really proud about Sidetracked, is we celebrate the toughest female adventurers that would, knock out any roughy tufty bloke on all levels, whatever they're doing. So that is an incredible layer that Sidetracked can give to the women who go out there in groups or on their own. I think, there's so many good role models out there in Sidetracked, which we're really happy to promote. We have a female bias Sidetracked because we love female adventurers, because of historically it's always been the Captain Scotts and the Shackletons and the John Franklins, and we can trace them all back to all blokes, and they've all got beards and they're all tough, hard men. But actually, I think the women are much tougher than men.
Thanks, Martin.
Absolutely. So how does it feel, Jenny, to be a woman in this man's world? Even in this issue, Tamara talks about how she I think she said she needed to be what was it? She needed to reclaim the feminine energy, because she felt that she was kind of trying to just copy what the blokes were doing, and that must be something that you
Lee,
come to quite naturally.
Grabbing Ginny and just sending
Yeah, I really like the way that Tamara put that in her article about wrestling with needing to fit the mold, because when we came into this world, maybe there was only one mold of what an adventurer was. And that's what's really important about having diversity in publications, is because you need to see that there's different ways to approach adventures and the outdoors. For me, I think when I started, I had this fantasy that by the time that I grew up and did some of my first big expeditions, I'd stop being treated like a girl, that I would just be able to stand on my own 2 feet and people wouldn't say, wow, you're really strong for a woman and stuff like that. But, I've done several world first expeditions now, and I've objectively made it in my career, but it's still people who don't know me, all the time, even if I just go for a mountain bike ride where I live, people would be like, oh, you're doing that by yourself? Wow, good for you, for a woman, wow. So we still got work to do.
A lot of work. And it's so bizarre. And the thing that people always say that they enjoy about Adventurous Ink, and I'm sure it's the same for Sidetracked, is they appreciate coming at things from a different perspective. And I've always found it odd that people can appreciate that it's good to come at things from a different perspective, but then they're surprised when someone presents them with that perspective. But I think you can learn so much more from dropping that male conquering hero idea and accepting that there's a whole plethora of ways of experiencing the great outdoors.
Yeah, and not at all to shamelessly self-promote and hog the conversation, but I did a project to release an anthology book called South Women, that's all female adventurers who approach it in completely different ways. And even when I set out to do this project and collect all these stories, I kind of had my expectation of what stories would come in, but they totally blew me away. They all approached adventure in different ways. They all came from different reasons. And it was so fascinating to have this book full of people who are bona fide adventurers, but as you say, there was no like colonial conquering narrative between any of them. And it's been so valuable seeing so many people read that book, and girls, especially like young girls, identifying with characters that they can identify with. Maybe climbing Everest never called them because the people that they saw do it just weren't someone that they could look up to. And finding role models that make more sense to them is the way to get them outside. So keeping that diversity alive on Sidetracked and diversity of stories is really important when you remember that part.
Absolutely, there's no doubt about it. And it's interesting that Martin mentioned the Matt Guest story about him paddling out, because that was his story, but then you wrote it, didn't you? How I'm interested in the collaborative process that you've all got there, and I'm guess I get the sense that John is sort of sat in the middle, pulling lots of strings and kind of cultivating you all. But how does it work? Do you hand stuff out, John, and go, I think this would be great for you, or do people? I don't get a sense of how this big machine of imagery and stories and words, and how does it all come together?
John the Puppet Master.
Oh no, that's not a label I want. It used to be very much just me, and I would work through all of the different submissions, pick what I thought would work well, and then speak to Jenny or Alex, or there was another editor called Andrew, and they would start working on different stories. Certainly for online, that was the case. And then with print, Martin and I would have meetings in the Woolpack in Slad 3 times a year, where we would discuss and plan and scheme and look at what's going on. Go away and see some of the ideas will come to life as well. Now the submissions come in, and Alex, Jenny, and I have a kind of a group chat now to lessen the load in my brain, I suppose, to make it easier to have others' input, and we figure out what we're going to commission together and what will work, what might work as an interview online or a feature story online, or whether we take it to print. And then that example that you referred to with Mike Guest that Jenny wrote. So I've known Mike for an awful long time, and we've been working, we've supported his project alongside Nick Pumphrey, who started the Dawn Days project. So we know Mike quite well, and we really wanted to feature some of his work in print. He has got amazing stories to tell, but wouldn't class himself as a writer. So he, in this case, he and Jenny spent some time on a few different Zoom calls, trying to get to the bottom of the story and what that story might be and how that might take shape. And in the meantime, Martin will be looking through the photo selects to kind of pin down a selection, and then the short list of photos and the first draft of story comes in, and then we lay it out and we have a look and see what works, what we need to change, how the story might evolve. And we just take it from there. It does just kind of naturally evolve until we get to a finished product.
Well, I think it works. I think it works fabulously well, and that collaborative aspect is something that I'm trying to develop much more in my practice. I know there's a fair few folk on the call who I've collaborated with, including Jess. Hello, Jess. You don't need to come on, but Jess is my first intern who's joining us, and that's been a big change for me to get to the point where I'm like, all right, it's not just me. So I might steal some of Sidetracked's mission statement, because for the first time I've developed a mission statement for the business and my own personal mission statement, and all of a sudden they diverged, and my mission was slightly different to that of the business, and I think it's other people coming on board, but I'm still learning all of this. I think it's fascinating. I did want to bring Tom in, because while we're talking about that, I know you had that similar experience of doing of writing up the story for the Gucci piece, didn't you, Tom? And I know that you're a great writer, so much so that some folk might recognise that Tom wrote the foreword for our anthology of all the books that we did last year, and they were beautiful words. They were absolutely amazing. So I wasn't surprised when you were drafted in for that. But how did that feel for ghosting a story for a is he a Hollywood A-list? I don't really know who he is.
Yeah, maybe he is, isn't he? Well, naturally, it's the kind of thing that I do all the time. It's pretty standard. Now, I think it was probably, in a lot of ways, the hardest story that I've written for Sidetracked. Partly because, for reasons mainly A-list celebrities, I had no time to actually talk to Jared. Didn't really know a great deal about what happened on the day, other than I think I'd got a transcription of a chat that Jared had with Jimmy, and that was about it. And had about 2,500 words, was it? 2,000 words maybe, to try and fill on their trip to the desert. And in some ways, obviously that's immensely hard, but it also is this amazing creative freedom that I could just tell a story that I kind of wanted to tell, drew upon some of my own experiences, and also trying to frame that around the little information that I did have about the day. But also try and bring a bit of meaning to it as well. I didn't want it to purely be a nice story. It had to fit in with the rest of the narrative that went alongside each of the other pieces. So yeah, I think the act of ghostwriting or writing about a trip that you were not on is always challenging, but I think it helps having been on lots of trips myself, and you draw from your own experiences. Ideally, you draw from the conversations that you have with the people that were on there as well, on the trips. And then, yeah, just have some fun. It's storytelling in a way that I love just immersing myself in somebody else's adventure and trying to put myself in their shoes in the same way as I do when I pick up a copy of the magazine and read other people's stories.
And you're wrapping up there, Tommy, in the way that's what made me think about this as well. Is that I think that's what Sidetracked does so brilliantly. Is it presents these stories in a way that you feel like you're there with them. So whether you could or couldn't do that experience, you feel like you've experienced it. You've got to. It's touched your soul in some way. It's stimulated your senses. It's got some emotion behind it, and that's not an easy thing to do. And that's why there aren't lots of sidetracks out there. There are only a few, and I know some have kind of tried to come onto the scene and some have disappeared. And I think that's testament to the great work that you're all doing. I'm interested in you all. Is there one story that really stands out from Sidetracked, or is there one that you really wished you could fit in? And that's the story for all four of you, really. I'm going to ask Jenny and Tom first, because I'm interested in the ones that have really stood out for you, whether it's something that you've contributed to or not. And then I'd like to hear from Martin and John about maybe the ones that you couldn't get, or the ones that stood out.
That's such a hard question. It's a brutal question. But I will take the easy answer. The article I wrote for my guest, as Tom says, like getting in the head of another adventurer and experiencing it the way that they did I consider that such a privilege in my work that I get to do that with other people. So the story was really powerful. Getting to know Guesty over the last year and a half has been really powerful. And the photos are just astonishing. So that story for me, like, I'm just so privileged to have my name on that story. So I really loved it.
John, Tom?
Yeah, it's probably quite a similar example as well, actually. I can't even remember what issue it was in, other than it was quite a long time ago. But I spoke to a woman called Anna Frost, who's an ultra runner. She used to race ultra marathons, but kind of retired, and the story was largely about her transition to the next stage of her life, which was not racing. And we had a really scratchy Zoom call with really bad reception for about 45 minutes, during which we covered some pretty deep topics around her depression and, I suppose, trying to deal with that, and then trying to tell that story from her point of view was at the time, I think it was one of the hardest things that I'd done. I think it was maybe only the second time that I'd ghostwritten for somebody. And to get the email back from her after she read it saying that's as if I wrote it meant as much to me as any compliments that I got about the article. And then just one second one, I'm going to be really cheeky. I think it was the first thing that I wrote for Sidetracked, which was a web story a really long time ago. It's not one that I'm particularly proud of, but it marked transition from having only written for a couple of mountain bike magazines to, I guess, a broader audience. And it was the first time that I realized, well, maybe this might be something that I want to do as more than just a hobby. And it's been absolutely amazing, I guess, watching my career grow as Sidetracked's grown.
That story was Paradise Lost in Volume 7. I've just posted up an interview, which incredibly has a woman stood by a lake, actually, as the feature.
That's where we like to stand. It's like, what's wrong with stand by a
lake? There's a sporting interview for it online, but the actual story that Tom wrote is in print.
Brilliant. And yeah, Tom, we didn't really have time, Tom. I know you've been on an adventure yourself, a bit like me. You were a civil servant who quit all that and went into the world of adventure. I think we've been on fairly similar paths, which is an adventure in itself. I hope we get a chance to talk about that another time. Martin, what do you think?
I'm like a real knobhead politician now, but in answer to your question, I don't have a favourite anything in Sidetracked. When it's in print, it's done and dusted, and I can't wait. Stop it.
We've all been there.
I don't have a favourite anything in Sidetracked. I just love everything in it, and I really genuinely do love everything in it. I've got favourite pictures that have been on covers and inside. But once it's in print, I'm only interested in what's coming next. And it's like unwrapping a present. It's like looking at unexposed raw film that I wonder what's going to appear on it. So I do not have a favourite anything in Sidetracked. I'm always looking forward to the next one. And it's funny, and John and I joke about this a lot. We always think the one we're working on is the best one yet. And it is. It always is the best one yet. And for some reason, every issue we do is the best we've done. And that should be because I think that's called progress in business, but that's how I feel about Sidetracked. Once we've done an edition, it's in print and John signed it off and it's on the press, I'm always looking forward to what's happening, what's going to go, what on earth could be better than what we've just done. And that is my favourite part of Sidetracked. Doesn't answer your question, I know, but I don't know.
No, it's a good answer. Keep pushing forward. Come on then, John. If you can't share a favourite, is the one that got away?
The one that got away.
No,
it gets away because they will come to us eventually. There's a big radar list, a huge radar list of potential stories out there. But each issue of Sidetracked, it just happens almost organically. So the next one that's in the planning stages, I think there's only 4 stories that we've got kind of roughly penciled in. But over the next month or so, we'll start working on it, and new stories will come in, and we'll just kind of try and think, what are we missing from this story? And lo and behold, a submission will come in that fills that gap. We don't plan things out that much, to be honest. We just kind of roll with it, and I love that. I love the fact that we just kind of see what happens and go with it. people say, what's your release schedule looking like? What have you got planned in the next issue? And I have absolutely no idea whatsoever. And that's great. I love that. No, we've run, I'm gonna guess, about 1,500 stories online and in print now, and I love every single one of them. Everyone, by people with passion and with a story to tell, and we're just absolutely privileged to be able to share it. So, yeah, just let's keep going in that direction.
Well, it's a great direction. I was just having a quick route through my mini shelf here to see if I could find one of my favorites. And I think it was called Skyline Across the World or something, which was an epic slackline strung between some towers in Utah. And at the time I was just learning to slackline, and it really stuck with me. And I was like, no matter what, I'm never going to be able to do that. But it was, for me, it was the epitome of everything that is Sidetracked, because it came with the most amazing photography. So yeah, really right. Well, guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time. It's been great to feature the magazine. It's been great to partner with you on the competition. We will be drawing the competition. I don't know how we're going to virtually draw it, John, and pull it out of a hat somewhere in the ether between here and where you are. But guys, honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure. I think you've done amazing work. I genuinely think that you've pushed the community forward so far. I don't just think you've ridden a wave. I think you were the swell that pushed everything along, just because you've had such high standards. So from everyone out there in the adventure community, thank you so very much, and thank you for joining us this evening. It's been a blast.
Thank you very much. Lovely
Thanks for
work.
having us.
Thank you. That was awesome. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Right, I will take you all off pin. If everyone wants to give us a quick wave, and then we will say goodbye. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, cheers, mate.
Thank you.
Come on, gotta go now.
Thanks, everyone.